Hello everyone, my name is Patricia Gensel and my paper for American Family Systems was on the divorce effects on children and their parents, and this research is on the family's relationship and the individual emotions. My abstract explores the different effects of the divorce on the individual factors. There are children and the parents and sometimes even in-laws and friendships that can be affected as well. All these individuals play an important role in the divorce. Children should never be blamed, typically, for their parents' decisions, but they are the ones that typically face the highest outcome or the most detrimental outcome because of it. There are obviously different circumstances to each reason why parents and couples want to get divorced, but in most cases, those individuals face trust issues because of it. In the typical divorce, there are effects due to the economic stress, emotional distress, and then the future outcomes of those involved. Okay. And in my introduction paragraph, I talked about the same things I pretty much just talked about in the abstract, except I added a little bit of information talking about half of the marriages in the United States today are ending up in divorce. Although the number is rather high, it actually has decreased since the 1980s. Individuals seeking divorce need to worry about their own emotional and potential health issues, but they also need to consider the other factors as well. Okay, and in my first body paragraph, I basically talked about the economic stress that the different factors and that tie in with that. First, I talked about the fathers, that basically they may have a more higher economic stress compared to the mothers in some cases, not all of course, because they are typically not the ones who get custody of the children, and they end up having to pay child support on top of maybe a new house, other bills, and everything for that matter. They may also have other individuals coming into their home, such as their new partner and their children, which adds on to their expenses as well. Okay, and after I talked about the father's economic stress, I also talked about the mothers as well. And I talked about how with the economic stress of the mother, typically they can, not only the mother of course, but they can end up depressed, because I found in a study that said after they go through the divorce, they typically feel the stress through the financial and economic stresses of it. Typically, sometimes if the mother is a single mom, she may need to work and take care of her children at the same time, so she may be typically losing out on money for that matter as well, especially if her children aren't in school yet, and she cannot find a babysitter or someone who can, like a cheap way of providing those services. Okay, and in my next topic, I talked about the emotional distress from it, and this is really where the children tie in, because really emotions with the children, that's a big thing, because they don't understand typically what's going on, and if they do, they may be manipulated into believing something else. So I'm going to talk about the different effects that children may face, such as negative effects in their behavioral and psychological outcomes. And back to the divided loyalties that I talked about in my abstract, their parents may manipulate them, and the children then have a distorted view of the family's reality. They may have feelings of abandonment and adversarial and ambivalent affectivity. Children may then also conform to a false self as well. They typically just, they may view themselves as being at fault for why their parents got divorced, and especially if their parents are making them go against the other parent, it can end up in a very sticky situation because they will have future emotional distresses from it, which could potentially be long-term if not handled correctly. Then with the children that are introduced through maternal depression, if the mothers are not physically capable of taking care of their children, if they're depressed and other situations, maybe health risk because of being depressed, then the children typically either have to fend for themselves or they just continually see that their mother's depressed, and it could expose them to a delayed cognitive and language development, along with mental health problems, suboptimal physical growth, and a wide range of interpersonal, neurodoctrine, and behavioral problems. There are a lot of children actually that have to face maternal depression, which is 1 in every 10 children. A lot of the time, mothers aren't diagnosed with depression because typically some of them can't go to the doctors if they're in an economic stress full time and they don't have enough money. They can't get their depression taken care of in a proper way. Then I proceeded to talk about the father's emotional distress from things. Typically, fathers get in a newfound freedom. Basically, they typically go into alcoholic substances that, quote-unquote, take away the pain. Typically, fathers just get really depressed, and if they don't see their children, they're higher likely to be more depressed. But now, since more fathers have been becoming the primary custody of the children, in those cases, fathers have higher levels of self-esteem versus if those fathers do not and they don't have any visitation rights to their children. I also found that with the fathers, it states that recently divorced fathers with full legal custody, basically what I just summed up, they just have higher levels and it's a positive outcome rather than a negative one. Okay, let me go down here to my next paragraph. I talked about the future of those affected in the divorce, which it pretty much coincides with the emotional distress and the economic stress of things, but this is more about their feelings and maybe the short and long-term effects. Okay, so with the final topic paragraph here, I talked about some of the kids can grow past the negative effects of their parents' divorce, but children may also have to face severe and deep trust issues and unwillingly do not let down their walls for others. This can affect social relationships, and typically children that have gone through a divorce with their parents seek someone who has a substantial family situation, and they would rather have some form of substance in their life just because they have never had that, because they have a false perception of what a true happy family actually is. Typically, to go off of that, each child handles a divorce differently. Girls tend to hold things in, which can run deeply. I personally know of a few individuals who have gone through divorce and it has been maybe 10 plus years and they still face like deep emotional issues because of that. And then while boys typically act out on their feelings, which can then lead their emotions to fade away, and they may just cut themselves off from, wanting to express emotion and allowing other individuals in, of course. Parents that are constantly worrying about their children, with other parents, like with the other parent, can lead them to negative behavior, emotions, and stress toward their kids. They may put their children's happiness at stake because they are feeling negative toward the other parent, and which can be detrimental to the child as well, because they just want to have that security of both the parents and want to make them both happy. Okay. I also had talked about in my paper that parents of divorce may also feel the struggle with future relationships as well. Although parents should be happy and continue on to have positive relationships, I feel and found in the studies that they should be cautious of their children's feelings and who exactly they have in a relationship and whatnot, because the children could feel that they are typically being pushed off because of their partner, but you need someone that's going to be substantially stable and show the children what a true relationship is like. There's typically a lot of hostility when children first meet their parents' significant other, and typically the father is always the one who ends up in the relationship first, which was found in one of the studies in sources that I have listed at the bottom of the page, or at the bottom of my paper, excuse me. In most cases, children still want to see their parents together regardless of the situation or the outcome of why the divorce happened. Typically, children, they just want to picture their parents together and live a happy life. When it comes to parents as well with the new family, especially the ones that are not the primary, that have the primary custody over their children, because typically children feel that they're being pushed out of the family and that their non-primary custody provider has started a new family without them. The parents may feel the stress of trying to allow their new partner and possibly her or his kids along with their own children, and trying to get them to all get along and just trying to be like a happy family or have a happy relationship with all factors and actors. In the conclusion, I have that there are economic, emotional, and future outcomes that are created through divorce. Children are typically the actors that suffer the most due to their parents' divorce. There can be short or long-term effects depending upon the child and the individual situation. Some children can typically have resentment toward their parents' new partner for a while, and maybe just short-term, like emotional distress. But then, as a result, it may end up being that they actually liking their parents' new partner and all of that, their new relationships given. There are positive outcomes that come out of divorce, but typically negative factors outweigh the positive ones due to their effects on the parents and children. Thank you very much, guys, and I'll scroll down so you can view my references. And if you have any questions, just please post on my discussion post. Thank you.